Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here. So over on Battlefield's official Twitch channel, they just had this thing called a Battlefield briefing where they had the Battlefield community manager or the EA community manager talking to a bunch of DICE devs, and they shed a little bit more light on the newest Battlefield game, 2042. Now this thing was about an hour long in length, so what I'm going to do in this video is try to compress all the new tidbits of information that we got into as small a video as possible. So here we go. So first of all, they described the game as the best pieces of Battlefield 3 and 4 spiced up with cutting-edge hardware. And they went on to describe a little bit about how they came to have 128 players, saying that they didn't just double the size of the maps and the vehicles, and they actually had to reinvent the pacing and the scale for 128 players. So apparently the groups of flags that you have to capture in 2042 are going to be called clusters. And within each cluster, there are a number of flags that you have to capture to be able to capture the entire cluster. They also mentioned that each cluster will offer a different type of gameplay. So some of the examples that they gave here is, for example, on the map Hourglass, you get this big stadium, and that will offer a certain type of gameplay, most likely infantry focused, and if you want to capture the entire stadium, you will have to capture all of the individual flags inside. And then the big city, that is apparently called the Neon City, and this area is all about verticality. So you've got zip lines going from skyscraper to skyscraper, up from the ground to the top of the skyscrapers, obviously lots of area to use your wingman suit, and then it's probably going to be great for helicopter gameplay as well, as we indeed saw in the trailer. So lots of big traversals there. And apparently there is another area on the map, sort of outside of the stadium, a little ways away, called the Village. And this is more like an infantry-focused zone, where you're going to have lots of small buildings that you can fight around and inside of. But there will also be roads going through there, so you're going to get some tank gameplay. So each little area of each map is going to be focused on a different type of gameplay. And they referenced some other maps from previous games, such as Gulmwood Railway. They said they sort of used this as a bit of a testing ground back in the day when they made Battlefield 4. And that makes sense. If you've ever played Gulmwood, you'll know that you've got sort of different areas of the maps. To the north, you've got two flags there with a sort of broken down, destroyed village and lots of small buildings around it that you can fight over. Next, they went into the freedom of playing in the game with the plus system that you can use to swap out weapons. And what they said about this is that you'll be able to use it to sort of change up your weapon into whatever situation you need, but you won't be able to take an SMG and just turn it into a sniper rifle. You know, they don't want to get rid of weapon archetypes altogether. But everybody knows that feeling in Battlefield where you come around a corner and you find yourself in an unexpected situation. Having this plus system will allow you to change up your loadout on the fly, maybe come out a bit more favourably. So that's like one of the major freedoms. And the second one they touched on was with the vehicle calling system. Now they only referenced calling down tanks and transport vehicles. They didn't mention anything about the air vehicles yet, so we still don't know what the system for the air vehicles is going to be. But basically, they gave some examples here saying, you know, maybe you've just been fighting over the stadium on Hourglass, you've capped all of the flags, you've taken that cluster, and it's now in control of your team, and now you want to get over to the Neon City. And what you can do is bring up your tablet and call in a transport vehicle for you and your squad. So I think they've learned definitely something from Gulmwood Railway, where if you're playing as an infantry player on that map, it just kind of feels like you're out in the middle of a desert if you have to move from flag to flag, and you're most likely going to die on the way. Now, whilst Conquest is going to be spread out and have these little clusters with different kinds of gameplay, Breakthrough, on the other hand, is going to be much more smaller, chaotic, crazy, and just centered around those crazy gunfights with 64 versus 64 players. But they did stress that if you do see a meat grinder in front of you, which we all know from maps like Operation Locker and Metro, that there will be ample space to flank around and lots of separate routes that you can use to get behind the enemy. Next, they touched quickly on AI. So basically, in 2042, there is going to be AI available, and you can both use this to practice if you and your squad want to jump into a game with just AI on your team and on the enemy team. You can use that mode to practice in, but it's also going to be used to fill in server slots. So say you jump into a server, you just don't have 128 players to fill it up. It will be filled up automatically by AI players until actual players jump in. So next they touched a little bit on the scale of the maps. They didn't say that with scalability they wanted to have the maps, you know, double or triple or quadruple the size that they were before. But they gave this little graphic here showing some of the comparisons of some older maps from past Battlefield games compared to the new ones that we will be getting in 2042. So they were also asked about some of their favourite maps, and one of them said that Kaleidoscope was their favourite, and they described it as Siege of Shanghai on steroids. So you've got the wingsuits, grappling hooks and zip lines, just crazy verticality going on all of the time. So if you're somebody who likes Siege of Shanghai, you're probably going to love Kaleidoscope. They also said that on Orbital, that's the map with the big rocket launch, there is actually a cool little area that you can stand in to watch the launch of the rocket really, really close up, and that's probably the shot that we saw in the trailer. They also mentioned that on the other side of the map there is this cryo facility, and to traverse from the cryo facility back over to the rocket launch area, there are multiple paths that you can take. So you can just take the roads, as you normally would, I guess. You can also go over the mountains, or there is a tunnel that links the cryo facility to the rocket launch pad. A really, really long tunnel that you can go through, so that sounds pretty awesome. Next, they touched on Levolution a little bit. They talked about the physics of the tornadoes that can randomly spawn in games and do unpredictable things. Some of the examples they gave were things like weapons and vehicles landing on top of a prone sniper. They also said there's going to be lots of mini Levolution, so gates, doors and bridges, for example, that you can like raise and lower. The little bollards that they had in Battlefield 4, those are going to be back. However, they didn't touch at all on destructibility, which is a bit of a surprise, because I think a lot of us were expecting that to be amped up a good few notches for this new Battlefield game, but maybe they're just keeping that tightly under wraps for the time being. So moving on, they touched on the issue of specialists. Now, I know a lot of people are worried about the specialists and them basically replacing the class system from past Battlefield games, but basically the rationale behind DICE's decision on bringing specialists into the game and getting rid of classes is that basically people would, generally speaking, choose their class based on their primary weapon. So they would choose the recon class because they wanted to use a sniper rifle, not because they wanted to have a SOFLAM or a spawn beacon. So by making all of the different weapon subcategories, the weapon archetypes available to every single specialist, that sort of gets around that problem. And they said that the specialists will fall under those 4 iconic roles, so for example Casper is a recon specialist. They also confirmed that rocket launchers will be available as one of the global gadgets for any specialist, so you can expect pretty much anyone to be running around with a rocket launcher, probably lock-on weaponry as well, and I'm worried a little bit about that because that's going to take some serious balancing if they don't want it to be way too overpowered for taking down vehicles. Everybody can also equip C4, so that little slot in the number 5 gadget slot there, that is your throwable, and C4 is one of those. Also, they confirmed that everybody can revive, which was expected. One of the specialists has, of course, a trait that allows them to revive people at full health, so I'd already been speculating that presumably means anybody can revive, just like in Battlefield 5, and that is indeed the case. So moving on, they talked a little bit about vehicles, and what they said is that they want vehicles to be platforms for team play, and that's sort of the mantra that they had for vehicle play when they started to design Battlefield 2042. And you can definitely see that there are different seats with, more roles. So they said that there is like a spotter seat in tanks where your job is basically just to spot. They're also bringing back the 360-degree turn radius for gunners. And they said that gunner seats will get different types. So there's going to be gunner seats with grenade launchers and rocket launchers. And there's even a vehicle that can apparently lay mines if you have a vehicle in pursuit. Other than that, they didn't really go into as much detail as I would have liked. They still haven't touched on the jets at all. We don't know anything about lock-on weaponry, flares, ECM, mechanics for the planes, any kind of weaponry at all. That's all completely under wraps at the moment, and I'm pretty sure there's a reason that they're not spilling the beans on that. They did quickly touch on the physics engine, and they said because it's in a new Frostbite engine, there's a completely new physics system in the game. So I'm guessing the way that the jets are governed is not going to be any of the ways that we've seen in the past, but they did talk a little bit about the new physicality of driving tanks and transport vehicles, and they said it feels really, really good to drive them, going over jumps and stuff like that. As we all know from BF4, the tanks are not exactly the best vehicles or the most predictable to drive, so here's hoping that it's an improvement. And then finally, they touched a little bit on the live service and progression. So with the live service, they said they don't want to split their community, which of course makes sense. So every new location, new map that is available will be completely free. And they did confirm that there are going to be 4 seasons for the first year of 2042. And in each season, we will be getting a new specialist. So the game will launch with 10 specialists, and then we will be getting a further 4 specialists over the first year. And then the premium tier, the one that you have to buy, will only be for cosmetics. All of the gameplay stuff will be in the free tier. Now for the progression, they didn't really go that in depth, but what they said was you will be able to work on all of your progression all at the same time. So whether it's towards different specialists or it's towards vehicles, it doesn't really matter what you're playing, what role, or whether you're in a vehicle or on foot, you're going to be working on your global progression all at the same time. So it's not going to be the way it has been in past Battlefield games where, you know, perhaps you start playing as Assault, you unlock gadgets and weapons for that class, and it sort of becomes your best class or your most powerful class, and then you feel like you don't want to start over and switch up again. Anyway, guys, that was just a quick little summary for you. Try to sort of get this out without a script or anything, you know, give my thoughts on it. That was basically the gist of what they went over, so not a massive amount of new information there, I will admit, but it's nice to hear something nevertheless. I think the next thing we're going to hear is going to be at EA Play on the 22nd of July, so we've got about a month now, a month of silence, until more information. In any case, guys, I hope you enjoyed watching the video. Subscribe for more Battlefield, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.